Geist and John Tiegen, members of the Benghazi Annex security team and co-authors of the book 13 Hours.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, America, for showing us the support and the dedication that should have been offered by Hillary and her State Department to those who actually saved their asses.
September 11, 2012, at approximately 9:35, 9:40, we got a call the U.S. consulate had been overrun. We immediately got our gear ready to go, got the vehicles ready, and we got, on 3 separate occasions, we got told to wait by the Chief of Base, Bob, and we got told to stand down. You know, next thing we know, we hear the State Department over the radio saying, hey, if you guys don't get here, we're all gonna die. Stand down, order to be damned. Embassies, the consulate's under siege. We took off, we left, we weren't waiting no more. As the three of us moved on to the consulate, the first thing you see is the main village just engulfed in fire and smoke, you know, and just pouring out. Moved up to the front steps of the consulate. Off to my right, I see them pulling a body out of the window, limp body, and ended up being Sean Smith, and he was already dead of smoke inhalation by the time we showed up. Myself and Ron continued to move. We went in, just the heat of the fire, you know, just blasted in our face. The smoke just obliterated our sight. It was so thick. We tried to get on our bellies to see underneath the smoke. Was no luck. A little while later, Tonto and DB came through the back gate. As they moved their way onto the consulate grounds, started searching. After a few minutes, Tonto went and helped the State Department guys gather up the classified information, get them ready to go in their armored vehicle, and all of a sudden we ended up getting a counter-assaulted. And at that time, instead of the State Department security agents jumping out and helping us defend their U.S. consulate, they took off, which left the 6 of us to defend the consulate. You know, I got out, went up on the roof of the villa, made my way up to towards the back gate. The guy who initiated was with an RPG. On his 3rd shot as he's coming out, as I came over the top of the parapet, I let loose on about a 10-round volley and he dropped. It was calm for about 5 minutes. Then we got word they were gathering about another 100 or so terrorists from the drone feed that good old Hillary was watching. And it came to a point where we had to make a decision. You know, at that time, we didn't know if the U.S. ambassador was even still at the consulate, if he had been kidnapped prior to us even getting there, but we're pretty sure if he was there, he was dead. You know, we had a responsibility of 30 other personnel over at the annex, so we had to make the tough decision, and we headed back to the annex without the ambassador.
You know, as the team arrived back at the annex, we took up our fighting positions because we knew that they were going to be following up from the consulate and coming to our place. But we were ready for them. We started seeing movement on the east side of our compound. Then all of a sudden, something came flying over the wall, had sparks flying from it, landed between Tiegen and I and exploded. And that's when they opened up on us, but we also unleashed some hell on them. The first wave had about 20 terrorists in it. They went away with a whole lot less.
After that first initial firefight, you know, Ozzy's being kind of old, you know, he's like 40 years older than I am, so he had to pull out his med kit, grab some gauze, he's like shoving it in his ear. It's really funny, it looks like he's got a tampon in it, but sorry. But, I kind of smile at him, I look at him and say, hey, is that kind of loud much?
And that's because Tig come right up beside me and stuck his gun right here, firing right next to my left ear. I can't hear out of it to this day, thanks to him.
You should have moved.
Soon after that, we got word that the support team from Tripoli, led by Glenn Doherty, had landed at Benghazi Airport. You think the airport security in the United States is bad, you ought to try landing at an airport in a foreign country controlled by a militia that you don't know who their loyalty is to, and you've got a bunch of guns and a bag of money. Thank goodness money talks.
Mine doesn't. So, going around 1:30 in the morning, you still have the U.S. ambassador, he's still missing. And, still we got movement starting to come up again on our east side. And, I get on the radio and said, hey, hey, Bob, are they going to secure the outer perimeter? Again, you're looking at 1:30, about 3.5 hours into the attack, and we get the answer, I don't know. Good intel. At that point, a vehicle actually came out of the darkness. A guy jumped out of the vehicle, immediately drew his arm back. How Oz saw him, old age with the eyes, he ended up picking him out, threw 3 rounds into him. He dropped like a sack of potatoes, and you would take that guy out, another guy would pop up, and then another guy would pop up.
It's kind of like that arcade game down on the main strip. You always go play whack-a-mole. Guy'd stick his head up and you'd take him out. Another guy'd stick his head up and you'd shoot him.
Pretty much about a little bit after that, we got a call that the ambassador was located at the hospital in Benghazi. There was no way for us to determine if this was valid, if he was alive, if he was dead. We don't know if it could have been a trick for us, to spread our defense, and pretty much just kind of screw everybody else over at the consulate. But we had decided to stay put again.
At this time I had moved from where I was at with Tig and got up on top of the roof. We call it Building C. Now I was up there with Tyrone, and during the downtime, me and Tyrone had started talking about events that night. And Tyrone had told me about earlier that night when Tig had saved his life, because he got lost in the smoke of the building over at the consulate. And he started yelling out for Tig, and Tig, with total disregard for his own safety, after having just come out of the smoke-filled room, went back in and pulled Tyrone out. It was during that, and he was talking about his kids. And it was really, because all of us had a lot of young kids there, every one of us that was there. And heck, Jack had just found out that his wife had been pregnant. And so he had a newborn baby coming. And, none of us at that point knew if we were going to make it home or not. And this is getting on to about that time in the morning, about 5:30, when the sun starts coming up. And you start seeing that change off on the horizon where the sky turns from really dark to that dark blue, kind of starting to turn light blue. And you're hearing the morning prayers from the minarets in the distance. About the time the call for prayer finished, we thought, hey, the next attack is going to be here. About that time when we heard over the radio that Glenn and the team from Tripoli had made their way to the annex and were just getting ready to pull in. And when they did, instead of going inside the building, Glenn, he came up on top of the roof. He wanted to get in the fight. So he joined us up there. And Tyrone introduced me to Glenn because I'd never met him before. First thing out of my mouth was, it's good to have another gunfighter up on top of that roof. He kind of turned and started walking away from me, and it was about that time that the final attack started. A rocket-propelled grenade hit the back wall, and small arms fire opened up from the north, right in front of me and Ty. A mortar hit on top of our outer wall, our outer perimeter wall, and the State Department guy yelled out that he was hit. Took some shrapnel up into his forehead. We opened up fire. Tyrone opened up with a machine gun. I opened up with my assault rifle. And that's when the second mortar hit. Hit about 15 feet to my right. The explosion kind of knocked me back a little bit, and as I stood back up, I kind of noticed that Roan was in a fetal position to my left at my feet. And I raised my left hand up to grab my rifle and start shooting, and that's when I noticed that I was first injured. And my left arm, about 6 inches above the wrist, was kind of hanging off at a 90-degree angle. It was then that the third mortar hit, and as I glanced over my right shoulder, I noticed that Glenn went face down on the roof, and he was out of the fight. I tried again to bring my arm up and grab my weapon because I wanted to get it back into the fight, and it just wouldn't work. I couldn't get it to hold on. And that's when the fourth mortar hit. And that's really the first time that I ever felt like any pain that night. And it felt like I got stung by like 1,000 bees. I figured at that time, this hard-headed Marine probably ought to get to some cover in case they drop another one on us. Semper Fi, thank you. So I dove for cover and everything went quiet. God bless you, thank you. I pulled the tourniquet out, started to get it on my arm, but I kind of got distracted. I wanted to check on Roan, so I crawled over, tried to find a pulse, couldn't find one. And it was about that time I saw a shadow come up on top of the roof, and that was Tig. The dust and debris still hadn't even finished falling when he come up on that roof.
He kind of got scared where we're initially fighting out of, so he went on the roof. And, as I'm standing there, and, the first round, he was saying Roan was just laying hate pretty much. And, when that first round hits the roof, it just went dead quiet. The debris was so thick, you couldn't see the stars, you couldn't see, it just went pitch black, pitch quiet. I start moving towards the building C, and I get on the radio and I said, hey, you guys all right up on building C? Of course, I didn't expect a response at all, but the team leader gets on the radio and says, hey, we're all right in here. Of course, you have to tell them to shut up and talk about the guys up on the roof. Jack gets on and says, hey, got no movement, ran over there. First thing I do is I jump over the parapet. The first guy I see is the state guy. He's kind of leaning up against the wall. He's got his pistol out. His left leg just below the knees, almost completely severed off. His left arm below the elbow is almost completely severed off. And I had to disarm him really quick. Lucky he didn't shoot me. Maybe I got a medal if he would have, but I don't know. I got 2 tourniquets. Put a tourniquet on his leg, put a tourniquet on his arm. I'm asking for extra help from the guys below inside the building, and the whole time I'm also doing that, I'm hearing kind of something crying behind me. It's kind of a weird sound. I don't usually hear that too often in combat, but so I get him done. I give him back his pistol. I unloaded it, of course, because you're not going to give him a loaded pistol back. But as I start moving across, again I can hear the whimpering, and the next thing I notice it's Oz. He's kind of sitting his back up against the wall, playing with his wrist, like a little kid, like this. And I'm like, hey, dude, you need to quit doing that. You're going to make it worse.
I kind of figured I was trying to put it back in place, but it wouldn't stay there.
Yeah, I didn't have any super glue, but so he had his tourniquet out. I grabbed his tourniquet. I got his tourniquet on his arm, stood him up, and said, "Hey, man, can you get to the ladder by yourself?"
I told him, because I knew that Ty and Glenn still needed help. Somewhere in the back of my mind, I was still hoping that they were alive. So I walked over to the ladder that went down and kind of sat up on the ledge, and I'm sitting there looking down thinking, okay, how am I going to get down off this thing? I just survived two or three assaults on our compound, and 3 mortars landed on me, and next thing you know, I'm sitting there thinking, my luck, I'm going to fall off this darn roof and break my neck. Those aren't the stories I want my kids to hear about how I died. If I'm going to go out, I want to go out in a blaze of glory. So I ended up hooking my good arm on the top rung of the ladder, and I was thinking I'm going to swing my feet down around and land on the ladder, but sure enough, Murphy's Law, what can go wrong will go wrong. So right as I kind of slid my feet down, I fell off the ladder. Luckily, I caught myself with my good arm. I kind of pulled myself back up, got myself together, and climbed on down the ladder. Walked around through the front of the building, meeting one of our other guys coming out, and he walked me in and laid me down on the floor. And I was sitting there and they were looking at me, and I told them, hey, you need to cut my clothes off because I know I got a bunch of other holes in me. I know there's a bunch of other wounds that need to be treated. So finally they got my clothes cut off of me, and we found about 20 or 30 other shrapnel holes. Most of them weren't bleeding too bad, so we got the big ones plugged and ready to go again.
You know, after I got Oz up, and you know, he kind of mumbled a little bit because he lost his cane when the mortars hit, so he didn't have a cane to walk across the roof anymore. But you know, immediately I went over to where the next guy was, which was Roan. I rolled him over, immediately checked for a pulse. His throat moved just a little bit. I didn't get a pulse, so I immediately ripped off his body armor, you know, lift up his shirt, and did what we call look, listen, feel. Kind of put your ear on their mouth, so you're trying to hear or feel their breath and see if their chest or their stomach's moving at all. Didn't get anything. I got the flashlight, checked for a pupil dilation, and there was nothing. So at that moment, I knew he was gone. And, you know, I knew Oz, he just went down. And, you know, so I knew the next radio call was going to be for him, and because Roan was also our medic. So I'd announced, hey, you know, Roan's gone. Got up, moved over to the next guy, which ended up being Glenn Doherty Bub. Again, same like Oz, never worked with him, never met him. Rolled him over, same thing, checked for a pulse, look, listen, feel, did a pupil dilation, the same thing, there was nothing. Immediately went back over to Roan, grabbed all of his weapons and stuff like that, kneeled down and said a prayer over him. Went over to Bub, you know, grabbed his weapon system, kneeled down and said a prayer over him. At that time, you know, we all got off the roof, and you know, we knew we had to get out of there. We had to get everyone else out of there because there was nothing that we had that could defend against a mortar attack. And the fact that a building just got hit by 3 81 millimeter mortars and it didn't collapse on everybody inside, well, it definitely wasn't the construction of the building, it was definitely from upstairs.
It was the grace of God. Once we got all us wounded stabilized, we secured the dead, we made sure that we didn't have any critical information left behind, and that's when we made our way to the airport. To get there, we ended up having to enlist a militia. Happened to be Gaddafi loyalists. Those are the ones that helped, that Hillary wanted to get out of Libya. They're the ones that helped the Americans get to the hospitals and get to the airport. When we got there, we loaded up the non-shooting personnel. I made my trip in the back of a Hilux pickup truck. It's kind of like a Toyota. They came over to me, I was sitting on a gurney, and they came over to grab the gurney, and that's when I kind of sat up and I told them I walked into Benghazi, I'm going to walk out.
Yeah, and that was the same plane that had brought Glenn and the guys down from Tripoli. But, you know, this was one of the planes that Glenn didn't make it back on. You know, the plane that they actually secured, the Tripoli team secured from a Libyan that they actually had just met that day. Again, I don't think it's really a coincidence. You know, we got an overwatcher with us that night. You know, we got everybody loaded up, headed to Tripoli, and then we had to turn our task because we got left. You know, we didn't get left behind. We stayed behind because they couldn't hold everybody. Again, the Gaddafi loyalist militia stepped up and said, hey, we can go get the ambassador. They took off, they came back, returned with the ambassador's body. Myself, Tonto, and one of the Delta Force guys, you know, make sure it was him, looked him over. You know, he was wearing the exact same clothes he was wearing that morning when I saw him when we went over there because there was a threat on there was a threat on a government compound that day. And, you know, but he was wearing the exact same clothes. The only difference, you know, he had black soot on his feet, on his fingernails, around his ears, you know, but there was no sign of torture, no sign of mutilation. You know, it was obvious to us he died of smoke inhalation. And all those rumors about that happening to him and our whole government not squashing it right away is a bunch of bull crap. You know, at that point, you know, we still didn't know how we were going to actually get out of there. Several minutes go, a lot of minutes go by. C-130 starts rolling down the runway. We're thinking, oh, this might be for us. It kind of comes a little bit closer, but then does a U-turn, pulls off to a little hangar area and shuts down. We see all the crew get off, the pilots get off. You know, we kind of stand there for a little bit. Well, one of the team members that came down from Tripoli and the linguist that came down from Tripoli went over there, and it took them about 15 minutes or so, and they kind of persuaded the pilots to take us back up to Tripoli. And again, the last American to leave Benghazi, we didn't leave on an American plane, but we left on a Libyan plane flown by Libyans. You know, the first U.S. bird, any U.S. asset we saw wasn't a jet. It was a medical transport bird that took us all to Germany about 5 p.m. on September 12th. You know, at least 20 minutes after a siege, right? But it was about 20 minutes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, in that night, there were more than 30 American lives that were saved that night. And it's because Americans never give up. We refuse to lose. Benghazi's been a four-letter word for the left, but it's not about politics. Benghazi was about opportunities. Opportunities taken when we defied the stand-down orders, and opportunities squandered when Hillary failed to protect her people on the ground. Had she done her job that night, we wouldn't have had to compromise the annex. Ty, Glenn, Sean, and Ambassador Stevens would be alive today. Now we as Americans, we have an opportunity. And that opportunity is to elect someone who will make this country safe again. We have to elect someone who will have our backs. Someone who will bring our guys home, won't leave anybody behind. We have to elect someone who will lead with strength and integrity. And I believe that person is Donald Trump.
You know, we did our part. Every fallen veteran did their part. Now do yours.
Now it's time to you do yours. God bless you and thank you all. Thank you, America.